Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another live broadcast on Remax Hallmark.live.ca. We're happy that you could join us today. And without further ado, here is Steve Tabrizi, Chief Operating Officer of the Remax Hallmark Group of Companies.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be here for another episode of the Remax Hallmark Market Report. And within the next course of the 45 minutes, I will share with you the changes that happened in Ontario and the Canadian market. And we will review the shift and what we should know and what we should do. And right after my session, we will have, as typical, the Q&A. And Shant will read your question, and we will try to the best of our ability to accommodate as many questions that we can. So let's start. So the title for this presentation is a shift in the market, what you should know and what we should do about the change of the market. So we're going to cover about 5 topics, 5 takeaway for so far in 2023, notable changes, the significant negative impact in our market towards mostly buyers, increase of the price sensitivity in the market, access to the property, and guidance and support to the consumers they need, and the solution that we feel that we should recommend within our market. So activity is returning. So we notice when we started the year, perhaps sometimes in mid-March, we noticed the activity is really rebounding. And if you look at the comparison of the units and the price and the new listing, we tried to do an overall picture of at least 5 years from 2018 to 2023, because we firmly believe that you cannot do a comparison of the month to month. We rather do a 12-month cycle and do a comparison properly. As you can notice, in January of this year, in the same format, comparing to the January of the last year, the market in terms of the unit was down by 44%. Prices were down by about 16%. And the new listing was down by slightly about by 4%. Surprisingly, as we shared from the mid-March, we noticed that the market rebounded very smoothly, and we saw the impact in April and May. And if you take a look at the numbers by the end of the May, the market not only wasn't in negative territory, in fact, was in a positive territory by 25% in terms of the activities. And the prices only were down by 1.2%. And the inventory was still low, was about minus 18%. So this rebound of the almost 24% increase in the activity, if you look at it from the minus 44 to 24, so we literally had a 60% positive rebound in the market activity. And people were wondering, the interest rates are still high, and inflation, yes, dropped from the 8.1 to roughly about 4.3, why the market suddenly rebounded. So the 3 reasons that really caused that the market really rebounded was economic activity. Canadian economy has been quite resilient. Consumers are still spending money. And consumers, I think they basically felt comfortable and really used to new era of the interest rate. Prior to the latest increase of the interest rate, the Bank of Canada's interest rate was sitting at a 4.5%, and the average mortgage rate was anywhere between 5.5% to 6%. So the housing was actually one of the biggest impact that really caused the Fed to do another increase of the rate. And then when you do a comparison between our economy, between the Canadian market and American market, Bank of Canada didn't have no choice but increasing the interest rate, because the spread between the US Greenbank and the Canadian dollars cannot be larger than a certain range, because it will impact our import and export activities across the border. So those are the major component of the activities of purely economy that really caused the Bank of Canada remove itself from the pausing momentum and increase the interest rate. So currently interest rate is sitting at a 4.75. It's probably historical high. The highest we ever had was in year 2000, that the interest rate was 5%. So this really caused a sudden noticeable impact on a consumer activities in terms of the buying. So from the mid-March to almost probably, I would say, the third week of the May, we had again market frenzy and market madness in terms of the multiple offers. And the multiple offers were happening everywhere across all our 8 regions. But in some neighborhood, much more stronger than the others, particularly in the price range of below $1 million, it was happening. And anywhere between about 900 to about $1.2 million, still the market was healthy and active. But above the price point of 1.2, we have noticed from the third week of May, based on the increase in the interest rate, the activity is moderate, the activity is flat, but it still is healthy and it continues to move forward. And the days on the market have increased by maybe about a few days. So we also take a look at what happened during this last 12 months in terms of the activity of the mortgage profiles. We have noticed about 58% were basically the people that they are renewing the mortgage, and 23% that were the home buyers. And 19% are the actual mortgage holder in Canada based on the CMHC survey. They are actually reconsolidating and they are refinancing due to burden of the affordability in the market that has caused them based on the increase of the interest rate. Interestingly, also the CMHC service shows that 37% of the buyer, they basically received a gift or a monetary gift from parents or someone else within their immediate family in terms of to be able to qualify for mortgage. 61% of the buyers had concern or felt uncertainty during the home buying process. And also 35% of the consumers, they were really surprised by unexpected expenses, such as the double land transfer tax in the GTA and other costs that they were not calculated into their profile of the mortgage before applying for the mortgage. So all these surveys literally shows that the buyers are quite fatigued at the moment due to the fact of the increase of the cost of the borrowing and uncertain cost of the associated with the home purchasing in the market. So, but also CMHC report shows that 68% of the people requested for home inspection during the purchase of their home. 44% of the consumers, they were in bidding war, and 35% more than what they planned for. So the second and the third survey really demonstrate that how strong the market it is, that almost half of the buyers were in the bidding war, and almost 1/3 of the buyers, they basically paid more than what they expected to pay. 65%, they had top 3 concerns: paying too much for their homes, unforeseen housing costs, and living with post-home buying costs was also another factors. It's a quite interesting survey that shows the vulnerability of the buyers in our market and how they feel about the market going forward. But we also like what we saw in terms of the 5 years comparison. If you take a look at the 5 years comparison that it was done by the CMHC about how the buyers, they feel about the market, you can see it's in a downward trends. Since 2019, the buyers, they believe the value of my home will increase in the next 12 months from 71% now sitting at 55%. In terms of the mortgage deal, 77% versus now sitting at 70%. But one of the good measure here is the home ownership is a good long-term financial investment. It's quite steady, it's quite hovering around the 80% mark. So it shows that the momentum of the buyers and demands is out there, and the buyers are firmly still believe that purchasing a home is good for their future and for their investment. So what is affecting the Canadian real estate and housing market? So purely, it's all depend on the population growth. Population growth is the factor fueling the consumer's appetite in Canada, and mainly in the province of Ontario because of the job availability that we have in the province of Ontario. So as of the January 1st of the 2023, Canadian population is almost sitting at a 40 million people. Almost about 7-8 years ago, Canadian population was about 36 million people. 1 million new arrivals as of the January of this year. So, and also almost 5.2 million application with the Canada Immigration Agency. The top 3 countries of the origin for the new residents are Southeast Asia, India, China, and Philippines. But the important factor that you have to pay attention here is a 1 million new arrival. 420,000 of the 1 million are permanent residents, and close to about 600,000 are student, work permit, temporary residency, refugee, and different categories that they are arriving in Canada, mainly based on the university factor. Majority of the 600,000 are the students that they are coming back and studying in Canada. But look at also the survey of the 5.2 million application. This is unheard of. Canada Immigration never had that many application, and they are processing application almost at the rate of about 50,000 application per month. So people wonder, so how are we going to really fit that many people in Canada or in Ontario or the cities that we live? Interestingly, we take a look at the survey that was done by IMF, International Monetary Fund, and it shows that Toronto isn't an overly dense populated place, as you can imagine, per 1,000 kilometers or per 1 square kilometers. So Toronto is literally basically among the bottom of the list. If you look at the cities such as Paris and New York and Mexico City, Vancouver is much more dense and populated area. So there is room for growth of the population in Canada and in particular in the province of Ontario. So what is the Canadian economy's strong despite record pace of the rate hike? And the reason behind this, and everybody is wondering, we had almost 8 rate increases, but still the economy is really quite resilient and moving forward at the pace that really even the Bank of Canada is wondering why it's happening. So 3 major factors. The Canadian banks and the Canadian lenders are quite smart and have policies in place, really, I would say, collaborative approach with the consumers. One of them is mortgage flexibility. Banks are offering, if your payment due to the increase of the interest rate is beyond your affordability rate and the interest covering is not covered by the current your payment, so you can actually load it to the back end of your mortgage. So what does it mean? Means if by the increase of the interest rate, your annual interest payment obligation to the banks, let's say, is $10,000 more, the banks are willing to offload it to the back of the mortgage. So if you have a $500,000 mortgage, your mortgage suddenly becomes $510,000. Increase of the amortization rate, that's another thing. And post-pandemic spending by the federal government still hasn't stopped. So the federal government, sadly, is spending the money beyond your imagination, and is basically supporting many businesses, consumers, by variety of the subsidies and policies that they have. And these spending of the government obviously has caused billions of dollars of the debt for the Canadian government on a federal level and a provincial level. So in reality, the Canadian over the last 12 to 18 months, they really haven't felt the pressure of the increase of the interest rate and noticing that basically they should pull back on their spending habits. And that's one of the main reasons that you see that the Canadian economy has been resilient. Labor market is really strong. We are sitting still at the 5% unemployment rate, and the wage rate is also increasing at a pace of about 5% on an annual basis. And the hybrid model really has helped for consumers to really still save money, and they still have disposable cash at their accessibility. So therefore they can spend more money. So debt payment and household income, if you take a look at it, since 2019, before the COVID, and during the COVID and after COVID, you can see with the yellow bar, you can see suddenly late 2020, mid 2020, and early 2021, we are really actual real purchasing power is really changing a little bit. We're on a negative territory around 2020, but we're still really not in a negative territory, and we're slightly going upwards. And even household after-tax income, it's really in a positive territory by almost about 5% to now, we suspect in 2024, based on increase of the interest rate, maybe will be moderately dropped to about 4%. So consumers are not really in the danger zone in terms of the spending or having the available cash, disposable cash available to them in terms of spending of their daily expenses. But there was also interesting report by Bank of Montreal talking about that Canada's housing completion and household formation really demonstrate that we are now at a very good supply. This graph was really didn't count into the temporary residents that they are arriving into the Canada. So yes, maybe based on the 400,000 new arrival in Canada, we are now in a ratio of the 1 to 3 per every 1,000 household, maybe about 3 houses that we are building. Maybe that's a good measure compared to the last decade. But if you add the 600,000 people to this combination, you will see these two charts are quite far from each other. That's a really mixed message by the Bank of Montreal. I think they didn't study this properly, and they didn't look at the census of the Canada, because the census of Canada is only look at those people that they are primary residents in Canada and they're qualified to participate in the census. So household completion per 1,000 population, it's really dropping. Toronto, despite the fact that we are supposed to, or Ontario is supposed to have more housing built, is dropping. So the supply situation doesn't look really good or better in the new construction. And the variety reason with the construction that it really has stopped. Cost of the construction, cost of the supplies, lack of the labor force. So the developers are not really building as they're supposed to build. And they are also wondering that should they maybe wait and ride the journey of the couple of years, then see the activity of the market picks up, so they can basically have a better resale value of their price or presentation of their price in terms of the future of the market. So very interesting also survey by Urbanation that the investor focus on the new condo units. 72% of the investors that they were in the market for buying an investment property, they look at the new completed condos market. And the reason behind this were very simple, the timeline. Every condo takes anywhere between 3 to 5 years to be built. And the investors, they really basically park a deposit and ride the journey for the next 5 years. And hopefully within the next 5 years, in terms of the qualification of the mortgage, it will be a lot easier for them. Borrowing costs will be cheaper and they will enter into the market. And historically it demonstrated that within the 5 years of span, they will have very good rate of return, almost about 60% rate of return on the deposit that they place within the developer, and the growth of the condominium unit prices and appreciation of the prices. So another survey which was done by Urbanation, which is very interesting, it shows the appetite for Canadian in terms of investment, 1 properties, 2 properties, to 5 more properties. If you take a look at the regional Greater Toronto area or Ontario or national, 64% of the Canadian are really showing the appetite to have 1 extra investment property. This is another phenomenon that really demonstrates that the Canadians are truly believe in the investment of the housing, and they do believe that the housing in the long run will be a saving for them. And if we take a look at the age category, we will see also the younger generation, the age between 18 and 34, are investing on a secondary property by almost 50% of them. And you can see as soon as we enter to the area of the 3 properties, basically the appetite dropped. And the reason is the appetite is not dropping, it's basically the issue of the qualification and the down payment. So what type of investment properties are people are gearing up to buying? Single family detached is sitting at the top of the listing, and then the condominium apartment almost, well, for the younger generation is depend on the affordability it's almost a tie. And then you will go to the townhouses and semi-detached. So they're either looking at a fully detached property or condominium. It seems that although everybody was feeling that a townhouse and a semi-detached, it could be a good choice for the consumers, it seems that the consumers are really preferring either single detached or condo. They don't prefer the townhouses and semi-detached. So, but let's take a look at the large appreciation, why condominium has been really a good appetite for them. Somebody who bought a condo, if you take a look at the average resale price, and it was anywhere between the 2020 was about 415,000 and the end of the 2022 was $472,000. If you take a look at also somebody who invested in a new condominium that they bought it for 574, they had a massive appreciation on the new condominium by the end of the 2022 because of everybody is looking at the new condominium with the new location, new amenities, lower maintenance fees initially, and also that 5-year cycle or 3-year cycle that they don't have to worry about any headache of their property management. If you take a look at this chart of the cash flow, everybody's wondering with the increase of the prices in the condominium market or even the detached housing, is it a solid investment to do? Only 48% of the investment properties, they have a positive cash flow. So 52% of them they don't have a positive cash flow, and the positive cash flow is dropping on a yearly basis, considering from the 2020, which was 60%, now down by 12%, and mostly due to the increase of the interest rate. But still, there is a big appetite for investment in Canada and in Ontario. So let's take a look at the market, rental market. So that's another indicator for the investor why they are the biggest portion of the home buying segment right now in the market. Because if you take a look at majority of the cities within the province of Ontario, we had basically double-digit growth in terms of the rental market. Look at Barrie, Ontario, we had about 12% increase in the market. Kitchener, Ontario, 12%. And only, even in Oshawa, we are really getting to a double-digit market. London had 24% increase in the rental market. So the average rental market in Ontario is sitting anywhere about $2,200 to $2,400 for a condominium. And if you take a look at the 2-bedroom, that's really the medium average that you want to know how much is cost for renting a condominium across Ontario. So historical prices in Ontario. This is another indicator that shows that the housing market is solid and it's continued to grow. If you take a look at the 5 years composite, if the average price was $604,000, today is almost sitting at about $867,000. That means about $270,000 growth over the period of the 5 years. That's roughly 45% growth over the course of the 5 years. 9% average growth in Ontario historically has been 7%, now is sitting at about 9 to 10%. If you go take a look at the single family home, if you take a look at townhouse and condominium, you see the similar pattern is happening across Ontario for the last 5 years. So let's take a look at the GTA housing overview. So you see in most part of the GTA, type of the properties, number of the transaction, everything is green. This chart demonstrates 12-month cycle and is also compare 1-month change. We can see on a semi-detached, the decrease on the prices, or condo apartment, it's quite small. Condo apartment probably had a 3% decrease in the prices due to the fact that in the last 3 months, almost over 30,000 pre-construction condominium are going to be ready for occupancy. So you will see a little bit of the pressure on the condominium market, and you'll see a great opportunity in terms of the assignment in the condominium market. In terms of the number of the transaction in all segment is positive and it's all green. Similar behavior in Ottawa with a little bit of the small changes in terms of the prices, in terms of the single family. And also, if you take a look at the average of the all property type, in terms of the 1 month is less than a 1%. And if you take a look at the 12 months, it's sitting at a 6% drop in terms of the price of the 12-month cycle. But if you take a look at the activity is now picking up. Typically, Ottawa is about 2 months behind GTA. And we have noticed now in the last probably 45 days, Ottawa is picking up the momentum and is really on the steady pace of the activities. The key, don't really pay attention too much in terms of the prices, because the drop of the prices are really, if you take a look at the 5-year cycle, there is no drop of the price. This is a comparable to the peak, which was the early of the 2022 or late 2021. Take a look at the activity. Activity has picked up by 30% overall over 1 month and 5% in 12-month cycle. And you can see in a single family is at 28% and 6%. Simcoe County representing the same thing. Average price in 2023 versus 2022 is only 12% down, comparing to earlier of this year, which was about 40% down. New listing, we are still minus 29% in terms of the new listing, and inventory has picked up a little bit from the 1.6 months to 2.5%, and the ratio of the selling price versus the listing price, it's a almost 99%. Yes, we had more multiple offer, but guess what? We are still selling them very close to sale price. The days on the market has picked up because, as I said, with the shift in the increase of the interest rate and the areas such as Simcoe County, that they are mostly end user buyers, so it will impact the fixed income earner in the area such as Simcoe County. London, Ontario is picking up the momentum. London, Ontario has been a target for many Ontarian residents because of the proximity of the location of the city and the availability of the job opportunity. So London, Ontario is also in pretty much most areas is picking up the momentum. We will see still over the 12-month cycle about 10% average or 7% average price drop. But we strongly feel that with the increase of the interest rate, the cities such as Barrie, cities such as London, Ottawa will pick up the momentum because they are much more affordable areas to live and to settle. So new condominium prices is very interesting. In 2021 and early 2022, we had multiple projects at a massive, crazy prices that they were launched. We basically, Urbanation came up with the top list of the average price per square foot of the condominium. And suddenly from about $1,700, $1,800 per square foot in 2021 or early 2022, now we are sitting at an average of the $1,472. So this is an opportunity for many buyers, for many investors, particularly now entered in the market. And the biggest project, which was sitting at about $2,200 per square foot, is the Beverly project. And then in Young City is scored at about 1,800 square feet. And you can see majority of them are sitting at around the range of $1,100 to $1,200 per square foot. So look at the cities in terms of the new condo prices. We see now the more trends going outside of the core. We can see Hamilton area, we can see Burlington, Whitby, Milton, Oakville, Richmond Hill. The prices are hovering around $1,000 per square foot. So that's when we see the opportunity of the migration of the many residents from the big urban cities, big cosmopolitan cities going to the smaller urban area, because the affordability of the prices that is happening over there. But if you take a look at also the side development, now suddenly you see the prices sitting at $1,088 versus on a previous chart, which was the city of the Toronto as $1,500 per square foot. So a difference of almost $500 per square foot. So which really makes a difference on a purchase of the condo of the, let's say 700 square feet. We are talking about at least $300,000 difference in the purchase price. So Q1 period for condominium market was not really in a great shape. The new condominium resale dropped drastically by almost 60%. They were about shy of 2,500 new condos change. That's why developers, they have a massive incentive, longer period of the deposit structure, lower deposit structure, incentive in terms of the upgrade, parking and everything. So once again, as I shared even on a previous presentation, that basically condo market and assignment within the condominium market is one of the hottest opportunities going to be for the remainder of the 2023. So There were talk about the high risk of the mortgage. So increase of the interest rate may cause delinquencies and power of sales. Bank of Canada did a survey. In fact, our mortgage high risk is been declining, is not increasing because of the adjustment of the price. Yes, we have an increase of the interest rate, but our prices, instead of late 2021, early 2022, that they were at a massive trajectory, the growth of the 30 to 60% month over month or year over year, now really has moderated to be a growth of about 7 to 8% growth. And that's why the risk is low. Another factor is basically the high ratio mortgages, that the people that they have only maximum 5%, 95% mortgage or higher, only 5% of the mortgage applicant, they have that. Debt service ratio also is another factor that basically the Bank of Canada pay attention to it, and is purely at the moment is related to the increase of the interest rate. And if the interest rate, hopefully within the next 12 months, take a turn of the sort of a little bit of the drop and settling anywhere between the range of the 3.5% to 4%, which is the normal interest rate of the bank that would like to offer to the consumers. So there is not really a major issue with the debt service ratio too. The current rate of the mortgage loan and that they are really in default is roughly about 1%. And the share of the home by investor, we keep coming back to discussion about the investor. It's really increasing to 27% this year from the year before that, which was 22%. That demonstrate that again, big appetite for Canadian that buying the 1 or 2 or 3 properties at the same time, because they see a long-term journey in terms of the solid investment with the Canadian market. If you look at the Canadian real estate prices across the country, with exception of the Quebec City, which small negative territory, you will see everything is in the positive territory. So overall, the Canadian market all back in a green zone. So the biggest question is this: we have an industry that is at the full capacity in terms of the construction, in terms of the bringing any product to the market that hopefully they can accommodate the demand that is there. Is it really possible to double the construction, to double the supplies, and really control the market in terms of the prices and hopefully aim for lowering the prices? Frankly, I don't think so. It is possible. Conservative and liberals both, now conservative more than the liberal, talking about the politics, which is maybe not the place, but I have to share it. They came up with the 3 platform agenda: giving financial bonuses to the cities that encourage more housing. Yes, you can do that. The same thing that the Liberal promised: trying federal transit funding to housing completion. Yeah, absolutely great idea to do it, but how long would it take? Selling off federal building. This is the number 3 that the Conservative, they believe they have 6,000 federal building, and selling them and turning them into the housing. Converting a retrofit, a commercial building into the housing, yes, it is doable, but it's not an easy process. Again, you are facing the red tape with the municipalities of the conversion, the parking ratios, the accessibility to amenities, the fire regulation, all these 3 points that now they've been reworded by the Conservative are the same policies that the Mr. Trudeau last year during the election announced. And they are on the paper, but in terms of the coming to fruition and demonstrating the result with the Canadian market, is going to be a long way before it's going to happen. So let's take a look at also the relationship of the Canadian economy with the housing. This is a big factor and continue to be a big factor. Real estate, rental and leasing, financial services, residential construction, it's big in Ontario. It's literally almost 30% of the GDP. So it's not a sector that the federal government or provincial government can ignore, because if this sector is not managed properly in terms of the risk factor, in terms of the affordability, and if this sector really is sort of a collapse, or people like to refer to it as a recession, it will cause recession for the Canadian economy. So Canadian government and provincial governments, they are fully aware of the importance of the residential real estate sector, commercial real estate sector, or perhaps the word real estate that has an impact on the Canadian economy. So let's take a look at, did the Canadian or provinces, they really listen to the consumers election after election, and they reduced the fees and the taxes on a development? Sadly, you can see only in Quebec, in Montreal, has the lowest amount of the fees and the taxes imposed for a developer. Ontario and Vancouver is even more than Ontario. They have a much more levies and taxes and fees. Therefore, if you take a look at a price per square foot, you will see a builder just got to spend anywhere between about $100 to $125 in Ontario, just paying taxes and fees to the municipalities, in the addition to the construction costs, in the addition to the levies, in the addition to HSTs, in the addition to also the increase of the cost of the land because of the shortage of the land. So therefore, that's when you see when a developer is asking you for $1,000 per square foot or $1,500 in the city of Toronto, they are literally looking at about a $200 to $300 profit margin per square foot. It's not like the whole development is costing them $500 and then they are selling it at a $1,500 per square foot. No, this has been a major factor. The cities, the municipalities are in a financial distress situation, so much that is happening in majority of the municipalities, and this has really been one of the biggest source of income. So lack of the intergovernmental policies undermining housing affordability in Canada. Let's take a look at this. Sadly, Canada's net worth is really declining, and the only way of the growth for the Canadian market has been immigration. And if you take a look at the immigration, the orange chart is literally through the roof. This is the program that the government wants by 500,000, but we just talk about it that they brought 1 million people through, also the other half of it through student visa and also work permit. Interestingly, the Canada immigration just announced recently that the people who are here with the visitor visa, applying for a certain country, not across all the visitor visa, the people that they have a hardship going back to their countries, they can apply for a work permit, 2 years work permit, while they have a visitor visa to Canada. So if somebody is, it's a very smart program because basically they want to absorb them into the job market. Immigration has been the backbone of the labor force in Canada because of the minus net births. So, but with this new policy, someone comes here with the tourist visa. If they got some sort of a hardship, they cannot go back to their homelands. They can apply for 2 years of the work permit. They will be attracted to the Canadian labor force. They pay taxes. And also now the banks, they have policies in terms of the mortgages for the people that they are actually here living in Canada on the work permit, and they don't have even the permanent residency. So if you take a look at this, the policies of the provincial and the federal government, they are not aligning with each other. So federal are bringing everybody here, and the provinces are facing this massive issue of how they're going to house these amount of the people here. So for years, federalism, or they call it decentralized federalism, worked in Canada. Basically, they pass the burden to the provinces. There is a share of the cost of the natural resources and federal own assets, but frankly, it's not working anymore because it's very easy to be sitting in Ottawa and create a policies that we need 500,000 people and 1 million people and pass the buck to the provinces, but it's not working anymore. It did maybe work for the last 2 decades, but for sure for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, it's not going to work because the housing affordability is definitely getting out of control. And also the migration of the newcomers into the country, really the system has to change. So is the Canadian government has the courage to make the shift? And what are the shifts that we think that it's needed to be done? So let's take a look at recap who are the people that really buying real estate? Of course, first-time buyer, those that are upsizing their home or downsizing. First-time buyer, now they represent about 37% of the market. But the third element, which really is growing, is foreign investor looking to purchase an investment property in one of the Canada's universities town. As I shared with you, out of the 600,000 of the million people that they came to Canada, almost about 350,000 of them, they were student. And that's the Canadian university is really attracting a lot of foreign student, and majority of the people, they would love to settle and live in Canada. Professional who recently immigrated to Canada in the last 5 years. Ontario is the hub of the jobs, is attract a lot of people that they want to work here. So the category of the 3 and 4, it's a really a big portion of our market right now. Out of the province immigrants that are basically advancing their career. So Ontario, again, is a hub of the job market and across Canada. After Ontario is Quebec, and then after that will be basically Vancouver. So these 3 categories, they see their future of the settlement here is in Ontario. So can't afford a home? Have you tried choosing a richer parents? That's was the Canada Housing Crisis website slogan. Here are the solution that we feel that we are recommending. Hopefully someone will hear us that we need to do. So yes, it's very easy. The provinces and the government are saying we will give the bonuses to the cities that basically they have a easier policies in terms of the housing construction. But you can give the bonuses, let's say to the city of the Barrie that they build more homes. But if they don't attract businesses, immigrants, they will not settle there. So rather than giving the bonuses to cities and the thriving urbans to basically build more housing, I would really strongly suggest you got to do it both. You got to give them the incentive in terms of the building houses, but also you got to give them the incentive that also attract businesses, because a lot of businesses right now are located in the large urban center, and the commuting from the smaller urban center with the amount of the traffic and the gridlock that we have because of lack of the infrastructure is going to make it more difficult. And it's obviously it's going to put a lot of more pressure on the housing with the larger urban center or such as the GTA, such as Ottawa. Investment policies. So people, they talk, the government keeps talking about the taxation of the investor. Why we don't have investment policies from the bank? If it's your 3rd investment property, if it's your 4th investment property, why not we have different down payment procedure? Why not we have maybe different land transfer tag to it? You know, I'm sure some of you on this call may not appreciate this comment, but an investor, if has the ability that you basically invest in the housing, it needs to maybe pay more and cannot have the same qualification of the regular end user home buyer. Removal of the stress test for first-time buyer. Why do we have a first-time buyer stress test? We should have the stress test. A stress test really worked in the change of the market of the rising the interest rate. We should be really thankful for that policy because really caused the adjustment of the higher payment for a consumer easier. But is it fair that the first-time buyers also got to pay 2 points above the posted rate versus also an investor does the same thing? CMHC first-time buyer policy. CMHC's policies towards the first-time buyer got to drastically change, giving them another $3,000 for land transfer tax rebate is not enough. You got to really encourage the first-time buyer that they are living in these urban cities and they have jobs, they have good credit, some sort of a differentiation that they can really qualify for mortgages much more faster. This is something that the OSFI's superintendent of the financial services should come up with those policies. And then after that, of course, investment in infrastructure and amenities and the politician promises, because the point really 5 and 6 is the points are long-term. Yes, we need to do the investment in infrastructure and amenities, and the politician promises usually doesn't come to fruition maybe every 10 years. But the first 4 really trying to attract businesses. The smart businesses by default are moving to smaller urban center because now they have a challenge of the attracting labor force in the large cities. So they are moving the hub of their business over there. But we really got to incentivize those cities so we can really spread the wealth across the province and within the proximity of the sort of a traveling distance from the major urban center. Remax Hallmark, it's growing as always. I'm sure you heard we are now going to be close to about 2,000 agents across province of Ontario. We are Southeast Central number one in almost over 50 market shares, and we continue to have a strong foothold in every market that we go. We look forward to further growth within the market. And I would definitely caution everyone that they think that the real estate market is really crashing. It's not crashing. It's just basically finding its adjustment. The adjustment is going to be tough for some consumers. We have to acknowledge that. But we are very lucky that the bank and the lenders are offering the opportunities in terms of the larger amortization, backloading the amount of the interest that keep them on the track. And we suspect also the interest rate for the July announcement will go another quarter point. Well, basically will be a 5%. Sadly, as much as we want to push the inflation down, but strong Canadian economy is not allowing it to come down. Hopefully this time, really, the consumers feel a little bit of the pinch and the pressures, and hopefully the federal government incentive program and stimulus packages really should reduce and hopefully will cause the consumers to spend less money, and we will have a really balanced market. Because rest assured, because of the amount of the immigrants are coming to Canada, the demand is going to be there. So how can we really create the balance is basically we need to support more thriving urban center outside of the central core of the Ontario, and to make sure we have a growth development plan for those cities. So consumers, immigrants, more settle there rather than just basically focus and settle in a large urban center. I'm here to answer any of your question, and thank you for being on this call today.
Thank you, Steve. Always good insight. We're getting a lot of positive messages in the chat window. So folks, if you're going to send in questions, please do it to the YouTube chat window, and we'll gladly read them out to Steve. So the first one is from Robert Eade, and he's asking, what do you think is the reason that many or fewer resale homes are being offered for sale? As an example, number of new listings and inventory.
So inventory is, Robert, is low. It's the consumers during this journey of the 2020, 21, and 2022, we are not dealing with the same home seller and home buyers that we typically dealt in the last 2 decades. Now it's become my choice. Where is my option? Asking my listing agent if I sell my home, where I'm going. So that's why you see the consumers are very hesitant to sell their homes, because frankly, options even in the thriving urban center or smaller cities are not as lucrative for them. Someone sells a old bungalow in Scarborough in Toronto for $1.5 million, and they used to, let's say, move to Whitby and buy a home for $700,000, half a price. So they had a nice asset surplus for their retirement or a variety of the reason for lifting their financial stress. But right now they're moving to Whitby and they're paying $1 million. So that differentiation of the price is not the biggest spread, and that's why it's causing that the sellers are not moving as fast as they want. But with the increase of the interest rate, we have noticed now some sellers are jumping in the market and they want to sell fast because they have this fear that with the increase of the interest rate this time around, which really was a a push, and consumers are really felt the pinch, and they just basically maybe they want to cash out and just say maybe this is the time for me. And at the same time, we notice also the buyers are now pulling back. 45 days of the madness is a little bit of the cooling off.
Next question comes from Saeed. He's asking, what do you think is the reason for sellers not to list and act like before, even if some were in the market before? It used to be easier to get listings by prospecting or from past clients and referrals.
CMHC surveys shows that the consumers, they really need proper guidance and support. So Saeed, it's I go back to the comment that I just shared with regard to Robert's question. Realtors are no longer can simply provide a general information in terms of, yes, the real estate is a good investment, Mr. Seller, sell or buy. You really got to demonstrate the numbers, facts, and yes, it's a longer journey to convince them in terms of the why they should sell. Try to find the motive. What is the motive of the move? Every individual has a motive. Is it an upside? Is it a downside? Is it the financial burden they have? So once you can address it from the point of the motive, your process becomes easier.
Next question comes from Sarah Kavusi, and she's asking, as interest rates increases cools the market, how do you see it affecting the market if we have another increase this summer? Are you concerned for a recession?
Okay, so a recession in the economic terminology is two quarter of the negative growth of the GDP. At the moment, Canadian GDP was supposed to perform at a 4%, but is performing at a 1.7 to 2%. I'm not really concerned, Sarah, with terms of the recession. I am more concerned about the ability of the buyers to enter to this market. But on the same hand, our market was fueled by 57% first-time buyer, and the rest was the different categories. The first-time buyer now is sitting at about 37-40%, but suddenly we see a jump to almost 30% in group of the investor, from which was a 10%. So the investor group is replacing the gap that now has created in the first-time buyer. So who's going to get really hurt is the first-time buyer. The first-time buyers are mostly going to move out of the core, out of the big cities. Even in Ottawa, we moved to Ottawa in 2016. Central Ottawa even was affordable, but now Ottawa is also noticing that basically is going to the surrounding or the metropolitan of the Ottawa rather than the central, because the central is becoming, even for the Ottawa residents or people migrating to Ottawa, expensive. So the question of the recession, if really they keep pushing the rate, yes, of course, it will cause the recession. We cannot deny that. Is this recession is going to be long-term? That's the good news. It's not going to be a long-term, because the whole purpose is to bring the inflation rate anywhere between 2 or 3%. We really had a nice trajectory from 8.1, guys, from 8.1 almost the end of the last year. And then suddenly March of this year, we went half down to 4.3. And now we are one notch up to 4.4. And because of the housing, I'll see that last increase of the interest rate and maybe the July increase of the interest rate, hopefully will bring the inflation rate to about 3.5 points. And even if we go to a recession, Sarah, it will be maybe a cycle of 12 months.
Thank you for that, Steve. Next question comes from Amanda from Buckhorn. And she's asking, how can realtors be more proactive in lobbying the feds and helping the sector that requires it, such as FTBs?
Got to talk to your local politician. You see, a lot of people just say being active. Yes, it's a great cause. It's a great notion that we all be active, talk to our member of the provincial parliament or federal parliament. But let's face the reality. The truth is the execution of all these ideas. Execution of all these ideas really requires the labor force. Supplies requires labor force. I talk about this in my last talk. we really want to ramp up the infrastructure and building fast. We need to have a foreign workers on a temporary work in Canada. Canada Immigration now announcing that they are pro as of last year of the foreign workers. Are you ready for this? 454 application of the foreign workers in construction category was only granted. 454 people. How could you build another 100,000 homes across province of Ontario with 454? So that's one policy we got to do. And the red tape. So you can talk to as much as you want to a politician. I am confident that they have heard everybody's, they know this concern does exist, but I think their hands are tied in terms of the timeline and execution.
All right. So next question is coming from Christina Corner, who's actually saying, thank you for the informative session. And she's asking, can you comment on the US Fed's decision to pause rate increases after the Bank of Canada raised? They hinted 2 more hikes coming this summer, fall, as you were saying earlier.
Yeah, so it's the spread between the two. So we typically got to be at about a 75 cents, US dollar, 1.3, 1.35. And I think the boat, they have now found really a good spot between the both rates, which doesn't impact the import and export. US market is totally different than us guys. US market in terms of the home equity, the assets, the Americans are quite far behind us in terms of the home ownership, in terms of the asset that they built in their home. And immigration policies, we are attracting rich immigrants. US is not attracting rich immigrants because of the policies that they have. So US definitely is pausing because their economy, it's now, it's have a good momentum, it's steady, but they felt it's enough to basically grow it. And Bank of Canada wouldn't also make the increase if the housing market, if the mid-March to end of May, we didn't have this rebound, which you guys all were surprised. What happened to the market, Steve? We have multiple offer. The Bank of Canada wouldn't increase it. The Bank of Canada just basically poked us again. And it's not only for housing, it's mainly for inflation and also making sure the spread is the same. So I feel that both sides of the border, they're going to probably continue to be on the same hover of the same thing, which is going to basically keep the rate pretty much similar. Right now, the rate in US for mortgages are sitting at about 7%, or they are always higher than Canada.
All right, thank you for that. I've got 3 more questions to read out, and then we'll end our live. The next one comes from Anna, and she's asking, are people holding on to great rates by not selling?
That's another factor. You saw that 58%, according to the CMHC, 58% of the mortgage application, they were refinancing. So 58% of the mortgage holder in Canada, they at some degree, they had to finance. But I can tell you this, people who bought in anywhere from about 2020, 2021, 2022, or last year, up to even March of the last year, Anna, they have an amazing rate. And if they were even on a fixed rate of the 1.8, 1.2, 1.4, whatever it was at that time, why would you sell? You must be really not thinking of selling, because that's a really cheap rate. And forecasting even 2 years out of their mortgage right now, which is going to be 5 years, hopefully by that time, rest assured that we have sort of a battle with the inflation and the rate will come down. But we got to keep in mind, the rate is not going to go back to what was during the pandemic. The rate will settle for the consumers anywhere between 3.5% to 4%. Mortgage rate will be 3.5% to 4%, versus now, which is 5.5% to 6%.
Ian has a question, and it says, interested to know what percentage of new immigrants have the ability to support themselves versus those that are here with virtually nothing. Do immigrants who have not a lot help or hinder the economy?
Well, the immigrants, Canada is a part of the UN mission. So obviously we have refugee asylum seekers, we have compassionate ground, we have a contingency of the people from the war zone that they really Canada opened its door and arms for the last 50 years and sort of allow them to settle in Canada. Yes, of course, they're going to be hinder on the economy because they are a burden on the economy because somehow taxpayers, they got to support them. But that's the history of the diversity in Canada, and we should be proud of it. But majority of the immigrants that they are coming into the Canada, they are in a category of either independent category or investor category. And those are, they come with the financial ability that they can basically not to be hinder the economy, it actually they help the economy. So you got also, as I said, maybe I repeat it again, through this new policies of the work permit that they can, visitor permit that they can convert it to the work permit, I think the Canadian government is really acting smart. Why? Somebody here is on a visitor visa. They pay massive expenses for universities. Now they change their status to the work status. So their payment to university doesn't change. But guess what? They allow them to now work. When they work, they pay deduction, they pay taxes to the Canadian government. The banks are also saying, okay, we allow you to buy, but you're not buying it with 5%, 10% down payment. You're buying it with 25% to 35% down payment. Those people are also basically adding to the economy. But the end result for Canadian government, which is acting really smart, is this. A new immigrant, when it comes to Canada, it takes them about 2 to 3 years to settle. Somebody on a student visa or work permit, it's basically already settled because the student people that they come, they got to be proficient in the English language. They are now engaged in university. And when they get a job also, they will be immediately engaged in the workforce and the labor society. And they are not a hinder on the Canadian economy, on a tax burden on the Canadian economy. And the end result is this. They love what they see, what they taste here. Now they own a home. Guess what? They automatically become a permanent residents and immigrants, and it costs the taxpayers a lot less than the bringing a brand new immigrants.
Okay, and so with the last question from Shay, it says, how would an extra interest hike this summer really help slow inflation? If the number one area where Canadians are fleeing the inflationary pressure in cost hikes, is their mortgage related to cost?
Very good question. I think the Bank of Canada's governor, he's also baffled by this question. He thought this much increase of the interest rate will allow the consumers' spending drop. But in one of my slides I shared on the banks, they don't want guys' power of sale. It's not good for them. They don't want to flood the market. So the banks are in a very solid position in terms of the cash flow because of the great economy in the last decade. So they're offering different avenue for consumers to navigate the pressure of the increase of the interest rate. Majority of the bank, when you talk to the people, they say my payment hasn't changed, but my mortgage amount has increased because they backloaded or amortization. That's one. One thing that the Canadian government is actually doing wrong and is not helping the Bank of Canada's government in terms of the making sure that the people stop spending the money is that the stimulus packages. But one thing else that we missed and we forgot to bring to the equation, 2.5 years of the working at home, hybrid model is only been out for the last 7, 8 months, 3 days at home, 2 days at work or vice versa. So what is it did? It created a lot of saving for consumers. And consumers, they're still spending those savings, but we have noticed, we call it consumers spending tracker. We have noticed the consumers spending tracker from being up is now flatline. So we are noticing that this is the time that that pinch, it's happening. And everybody talks now these days with the last increase height about their mortgage payments. So yes, the increase of the interest rate might, everybody thinks of fueling the market, but hopefully it doesn't fuel the market because it will reduce the ability of your purchase power. And also it's not only for consumers, it will reduce the ability of the businesses to grow in terms of the investment. Cost of the borrowing, when it goes up, businesses, they don't invest, they don't renovate, they don't buy the new equipment, they don't buy the new cars, they don't buy anything. So hopefully that will also cause that slowing down of the economy. The whole idea is slow down the economy, the inflation comes down.
That was great. Actually, I have one question.
Go ahead.
And I want to keep it at the end. And it's a tricky one because I've been trying to understand it. I saw it on it was on social media through an economist, and said one of the banks, which I will not name, just got audited, and it was close to alarming, saying that their position in holding on to mortgages was getting close to alarming. And I believe the government's going to force them to raise more cash, I believe. So this person was saying the banks might be putting stuff out there where to get people to deposit more money, but with, I guess, better interest rates. What do you think of that one?
Well, you can mention the bank. It was all over Twitter and news. It was CIBC. So, look, the office of the OSFI, the Superintendent Financial Office, it's really has raised the bar for the bank in terms of their deposits. What the bank they do? What's a mortgage? Consumers' investment in the stock, in the deposit, in the money, in the GIC. They basically package it. They call it mortgage fund, and then everything, the cycle works. Yes, the bank might end up right now offering more attractive GIC term, investment terms to attract the people that basically shift their investment from a different portfolios to maybe sort of a safe portfolios long-term investment. I don't think the banks are. It's similar story a few months ago. If you recall, some of the small bankers in the US, they went down, and Mr. Biden right away jumped in and saved them through the insurance policies. And they said, oh, TD Bank is expanding too fast in the US. They canceled their expansion plan. Yeah, the banks are also watching their pocket. There's no question in my mind. The increase of the interest rate and allowing the consumers to ride, it's going to reach a point that if this inflation doesn't come down, the banks are going to say, hold on a second, I can't take this risk. I can't keep add the interest to the back end of the mortgage. I can't just increase the amortization from 25 now to 30, some places to 35 or 40. But those are the policies that the banks, they will do. But I'm not worried about any of the Canadian major bank. Canada is well known globally that we have very conservative control policies in terms of our lending practice. And if you take a look at the last 2 decades, from 2008, the Lehman Brothers crash, 2012 hiccup in the economy, 2017 and 2022, 4 cycle, Canadian bank, they have navigated better than any other financial institution in the global market because of the conservative policies and regulation that we have, that it saves us. We are not a wild west here. We just don't lend as easy as American or even European. And getting the mortgage these days is very difficult. But I'm more worried about the alternative lending, because in the last 10 decades, there are massive alternative lending that they came into the market, take advantage of the opportunity of the mortgage segment. And some of them, they are deep pockets. Some of them, they may face the music that basically either amalgamate or basically they may have some default in terms of their mortgages.
Well, thank you for that, Steve. I want to say special thank you to everybody who tuned in this morning for Steve's live broadcast. We will be doing more of these regularly, not every month, but probably quarterly as Steve wants it. And once again, yeah, thank you very much. And I'll give you the final word, Steve.
Thank you very much. Stay positive. You want to navigate this market, study the market more, and make sure that basically you present your cases to the consumers based on the facts. Discover the consumer's motivation, why they are buying, why they are selling. Just don't go through the journey of the word real estate market is great investment. Yes, real estate market is a great investment, but you are all a consultant to giving the best advice to your consumers, to making sure that basically the journey of the home ownership for them is in a really a happy journey, not impacting their personal life. You can own a home very easily as long as you have a good advisor on your set. And I know Hallmark agents are, all of them are true professional, and We look forward to further growth within the Ontario and cross the border. I'm sure you heard about that we are expanding to Florida. So Remax Hallmark USA will be opening soon, sometimes in August, and operating in Florida. And Hallmark Without the Borders will continue to grow. But no matter what, we are still the same family. We are available, amazing leadership team, 29 of us in the leadership team. And you can get hold of us anytime you need us. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.